Hello. Okay. Hello on Facebook. Hello on Instagram. Just gonna wait a couple of seconds for people to join. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about this topic today because I think it is something that many of us struggle with. And it's a topic that I'm really excited about talking about and really believe that it's such an important thing for us to talk about and to navigate and to support each other along that journey. So yeah, all right. So let us know if you're joining live. Just type hi, little wave, especially on Facebook because it doesn't show me. Sometimes it doesn't even show me that anyone is viewing, let alone who. um, but yeah, even if it does show me that someone's viewing, I don't know who it is. Okay, awesome. Hey, Guy. Don't worry if you came on and you're like, didn't know what's going on here. Okay, cool. So today we're going to be talking about worrying about what other people think, which I think is such, it's such a common thing. It's such a struggle that we can all relate to, I think. Um, and I think that some people sometimes assume that I don't struggle with this. But it definitely has been a huge struggle for me. I think maybe part of it is like I grew up with a quite a unconventional family, so from a very young age we were like not sort of the traditional what do you call it, like um, yeah, like we had to almost like come up against what people thought and judgments of other people quite early on. My dad was a Buddhist monk and runs Zen retreats on our farm. So in like a community of very Afrikaans, like farmers, we were sort of the only English, and or other than my dad's brother, and then being Buddhists in a very sort of Christian community, and yeah, just in general a lot of like having to navigate that I think from quite early on. So I think I already had like a baseline of, you know, learning how to navigate that. But I think for me, it almost exacerbated it because hey, I almost thought of it as like, I finally want to just like fit in and not have to like constantly be in this space where I'm thinking people are judging me or, thinking certain things about me. So in some way, it actually exacerbated that desire to fit in and to kind of mold myself to other people and what I think people wanted, and um, to avoid judgment and discomfort and all of that. But I do think I had to learn quite early on, and I think the past few years definitely have been. I think I've made huge strides in that area and made a lot of decisions that were genuinely from what I wanted, and having to sort of be okay with other people's judgments and what they might think of it and all of that. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to give some example scenarios of how this shows up, and I'd love to know in the comments whether you're watching this live or in the replay, or you're catching the replay, to let me know which ones you resonate with, which ones you can relate to. So it comes up in things like, let's say you are, a practice owner, or you need to sort of, market yourself. So to put yourself out there, to maybe be on social media, be visible, show up to things. It can make us very hesitant to do that because we're worried about what other people are going to think. We might be hesitant to tell someone what we even do. This is particularly for the not a real doctor people among us, including myself. I was always hesitant to tell people I'm a chiropractor because I just know how many different like um, associations people have with chiropractors, and I just like did not want to get into that, and I didn't want them to think that I was this like weird person. And so I often like avoided that whole conversation. Um, so things like that. Maybe you want to practice very differently to the norm in your profession. You want to do something a bit different, creative, innovative, but you're worried that people in your profession would judge you for that. Maybe you want to set a boundary, like you want to choose your practice hours and you want to be very clear with patients and say no when they want to book outside of those hours. Maybe you want to, interrupt a patient or, mold the conversation when they're like going on a long tangent and you're needing to wrap up time wise. Or they're just, telling something that's completely irrelevant to what you're talking about, and you need them to come back and give you relevant information. So maybe you need to interrupt them or guide them in that way, but maybe you think they will think that you're rude or selfish or whatever it is. It can come up with similar things like, maybe we want to change our treatment time. Maybe we want to, shorten our treatment time. Maybe we want to change something about the way that we treat, and we're worried what the patient is going to think. Just looking at other examples. So maybe you also just have this like, I remember experiencing this, like a very constant low level anxiety. Like it was just there, it was just buzzing all the time. And this feeling of almost like you're going to get into trouble. Because you're constantly like monitoring other people and trying to read their minds, like what do they think of me? What are they judging of me? Am I like matching up to their expectations? Did I say something that they didn't like? Do they like me? Do they approve of me? Are they mad at me? So that constant like anxiety of just monitoring the whole time what people are thinking. And then also related to that, I think we often, this is what I definitely did a lot, is we almost like modify our personality, our opinions, our thoughts, um, just what we like to do, everything about our personality, we kind of mold, even if it's just very subtly. Sometimes it's quite extreme. We're just pretending we like something when we don't, or pretending we agree with something when we don't. But we're sort of molding that according to whoever we're with or whatever group of people we are with and what they think and what the norm is in that particular group. And so there's this constant monitoring and like molding ourselves to that. So all in all, you can see how this would keep us stuck. It would make us, not go for certain opportunities because we're worried about that. We might be just sort of not quite moving forward with something, like that idea of like having one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake, or Americans gas and brake. That you sort of like, I want to put myself out there and I want to, maybe show up on social media more, or I want to, go in this new direction, but at the same time putting on the brake because I'm like worried about that judgment and the perceptions of other people. So we can get really stuck and just not able to move forward with something. We can get just that, that anxiety, the general discomfort of it. So anxious, exhausted from the constant monitoring, or, when we aren't able to set those boundaries, for example, we might just be overgiving and absolutely exhausted by that. So that anxiety, that exhaustion, we tend to get very disconnected, and that disconnection can be from other people because we can often feel like, people accept me and they like me, but I know that they are accepting and liking like a different version of me, or like this, it's not the true me anyway. And so we almost like molding ourselves to seek that approval and that acceptance, but we don't trust it when we get it because we know what we did in order to get that, right? So we can be disconnected from other people, but we can also be very disconnected from ourselves. Because if we are constantly like being someone else, or we are not setting boundaries, or we are not really expressing ourselves, um, at least not authentically, we can feel very disconnected from who we actually are, and we can start to lose touch with what we actually do think and what we want and all of that, because we are constantly using other people's opinions and judgment to decide what we do and to know how we think about things and how we feel about things, to make decisions. And so we really get, I guess, out of touch with ourselves. Okay, so let me know if you can relate to any of that. And I think what also happens is like it just never feels like it's enough. It just never quite gets there. Like it's like a drug where it's like it's almost that thing that we're craving, but it just never quite satisfies it, and so we seek it more and more. And it's that kind of feeling like we're doing these things to make sure everyone is happy with us, and to not have people judging us, and to not have people criticizing us, and not have people thinking certain things of us. But we just never quite get that control over it, and we never get the acceptance and the belonging that we are craving from that. Because belonging is very different to fitting in. In fact, they're actually opposites, or they're enemies of each other. Because fitting in is you sort of, molding yourself in order to fit into that group. Whereas belonging is being yourself with other people. Um, I'll go into that a little bit more another time. But there's a great book by Brene Brown called Braving the Wilderness, and it's all about that. That was one of like the books that sort of was a catalyst for me to explore this more and more. Okay, so it also never ends up being enough, because, as you might have noticed, you can't read people's minds. And at least, even if you think you are reading their minds and you're reading it accurately, you never get confirmation of that, right? So you can have this idea that someone thinks you're mean or selfish or whatever, but sometimes we get proven completely wrong. Sometimes we think someone, really didn't like us, and meanwhile they like loved us. I've had that with patients as well. There were a couple of patients that I really thought like they do not like me at all, and they're not happy with their care. And then like they would say like, "Oh, I'm so like grateful for you." This is like way down the line, and I'm like, "You are." Or when I was leaving the practice, for example, that they'd be so upset, and like I did not expect that at all. So sometimes we're just purely wrong about what people think of us. But even if we never really know, yeah, we just never have that confirmation of whether we are right about what we are perceiving that they're judging us on. So we are molding ourselves, but we might not even be molding ourselves in the right direction. So yeah, it just ends up being like a cycle that just never feels like it satisfies that desire of connection, of belonging, and of people truly accepting us. So why do we even struggle with what people think so much? Like, why is it such an issue for us? And generally, I find that women struggle with this more, and there are certain like societal conditioning reasons why this is. But in general, there are two like main sort of reasons that I wanted to discuss of why we struggle with this. So the one is what we call neuroception. So your brain, that is like the process of your brain that constantly scanning for threats. And if you think of the majority of human history, right, we were in small kind of villages or tribes, we were in small groups, and we really depended on each other and that like close-knit community for our survival. So it was really important that we were accepted within that group, that we weren't, ousted from the tribe. And so we developed with that kind of approach, But in the modern world, it's such a different environment. And so we're constantly exposed to so many different people, so many different cultures and norms, so many different opinions. And we see people, how, people on the internet, for example, are so like judgmental or critical. So we're exposed to so much more. And so our brains, like scanning, is picking up like a million different threats all the time. Um, and we just are in such a different environment, right? We no longer rely on our close, or rather, let's say we don't rely on being accepted in a community for our survival anymore, whereas then we did, right? So it's almost like out of date with what it is, what the current situation is. But I mean, modern life is such a recent development in human history that it makes sense that our brains are not particularly suited for this. So just to be aware of that. Um, and the second thing is the idea of our cognitive development as adults, right? So as adults, we have a phase in our adult development that is what we call the socialized mind. And in the socialized mind, it is absolutely critical what other people are thinking of us. We have a very externalized sort of sense of self. Our values and our opinions and all of that are very much influenced by the outside world. And that's normal in our early adult development, right? But then as we're developing, we want to be moving into the next phase, which is called self-authorship. And self-authorship is essentially, what it sounds like, is that we are authoring our own story instead of being so focused on external opinions, judgments, compasses, values, ideals, social norms. We develop the skills to look internally and say, what do I think? What do I find important? What are my definitions and my standards for things? And that is a stage that we really are developing as adults. So it might just be that you're still in that phase where you're in the socialized mind. And then also on top of that, that idea of how we evolved in human history, and the fact that we see not being accepted in the tribe as a very real threat. We genuinely feel like we are unsafe. So if it feels absolutely terrifying to you, that you literally feel like you're going to die, there's a reason for that. Okay, so based on those things, we can then talk about, what might be helpful in order to not worry so much what people think, so that we're not so stuck, so we're not so anxious and exhausted, so we're not so disconnected from others and ourselves. So because we know that it's protective, right? If our brain is genuinely seeing that as a threat, we can recognize and we can appreciate that protection, right? Like just almost saying, I know my brain is trying to protect me. It's genuinely trying to help me. And I appreciate that. And it's doing a great job of that. But almost like being the sort of parent that's comforting the child, that kind of thing. Like, okay, my brain is really scared. It thinks that we are threatened. It thinks that we're going to die. I appreciate the protection. I appreciate that you're trying to keep me safe, but it isn't necessary. We are safe. This isn't a threatening environment. And almost like supporting yourself through that, regulating, making sure that you feel safe and supported. And that includes not saying, what is wrong with you? Why can't you just, have that conversation, put down that boundary, make that social media post? Like, what is wrong with you? It's not hard. It is really hard. And if we are supportive and understanding and recognizing of that protective mechanism, we can actually support ourselves and still do the thing, rather than beating ourselves up and being so stuck and paralyzed that we can't take any action. And then if we think about the Oh, sorry, and that includes like any kind of nervous system regulation techniques that you like to use, like breathing techniques or meditation, or things like vagus nerve exercises. Um, so you can use certain regulatory exercises, ones that you find helpful, but also sometimes just accepting that, okay, this anxiety and this feeling, the fact that it's scary is normal and it makes sense. And then we're not adding this like extra suffering and extra anxiety on top of the fact that we are scared. Like I'm anxious about being anxious. Okay, and then on the side of self-authorship, if we think of this as like a stage of our adult development, we're just trying to slowly cultivate more and more self-authorship. So we're trying to get to know ourselves better, and that includes spending time with ourselves. It includes, brainstorming on what do I value, what are the things that are really important to me, so that, for example, when I'm trying to make a decision, I'm looking at that compass rather than, what will people think, right? I'm looking at, well, what do I believe is important? If, let's say, you are wanting to leave your job, for example, right? And you're saying like, okay, well, what are people going to think of me? What is my boss going to think of me? What are my friends and family going to think of me? What is, society going to think? It makes no sense that I'm leaving this job. It's a great job. All of these things, right? But then instead of looking at those external things, you're starting to direct internally and say, okay, but what's important to me? Like, is it more important that I'm financially secure, or is it more important that I'm being courageous, or that I'm pursuing something that I'm really interested in, regardless of whether people are going to be disappointed or not understand? And so you almost like creating your own set of standards and values, so that you have some other compass to turn to instead of what other people think. I almost think about this as like, at least this was what was helpful for me, is like, it's hard to not do something, or to try to not do something, to try and stop doing something when it comes to behavior change. In other words, it's difficult to just stop caring what other people think, right? And we don't necessarily want to completely stop caring about what other people think. We care about the people close to us, what they think. We might just be more selective about, whose opinion we are taking into account, rather than just anyone and everyone, right? Like, do the people that I'm worried about, do they have my best interests at heart? Do they know me very well? Do their values align with my values? And we can use that to gauge whose opinion matters, right? So we don't want to just stop caring about what other people think, but I almost think about it as like, we just want to care about what we think more. So if you think about, like, at the moment, this is how much like, this is how much I care about, what I think of me, and this is how much I care about what other people think of me. And so this is directing my behavior all the time. I'm looking at what other people think, I should do, their judgments, their values, etc. I'm looking at that to determine what I do, because that I'm perceiving as more important than what I think. And instead of like bringing this down by caring less what other people think, or not caring what people think, we almost want to just bring this up. So caring more what you think, so that it's at the same level at least, or then, the next stage might be that it's more important. But slowly building up your own values, your compass, what's important to you, what do I think about myself, right? Is it important for me to not disappoint other people, and in the process maybe disappoint myself, right? Is it important to me that I'm, avoiding the discomfort of other people's judgments, but I am keeping myself stuck, or I'm not going after something that I really want, in order to do that, right? Like, what do I think of that decision, right? So almost like, what is my judgment of myself and my own character versus like other people's perceptions? So you starting to define things for yourself as well, right? if you are worried about people not thinking that you're smart, for example, like how can you define for yourself what it means to be smart, right? If smart currently means I never get an answer wrong, I never not know when someone asks me a question, you can see how that's going to be quite paralyzing and stressful. But also, you're not going to put yourself in rooms where other people know more than you, which, by the way, are the rooms that you will learn the most in. But you won't put yourself in those rooms because you don't want to be seen as the person who doesn't know the answer or who knows less, right? And so, redefining smart as like maybe to me, smart means I'm curious. I stay curious. I stay learning, right? I'm always open to learning more. Um, Maybe it even means I put myself in situations where I deliberately am not the smartest person in the room so that I can learn more and actually be smarter. So starting to take a lot of the words that we are worried that other people will think of you. Like if you take the specific scenario that you maybe are struggling with and you're worrying about what other people think of you or might think of you, if you had to do that thing, take that word, so that word that you think, oh, they will think I am blah, blah, blah. Take that word and just journal on a little bit. Journal on, like, what does that actually mean? Maybe what is the dictionary's definition of it? Do I agree with that definition? What is going to happen if I'm constantly like protecting myself from that thing? Um, how do I want to define that, right? So you coming up with essentially self-authorship is like coming up with your own definitions, your own compass for things, your own standards, your own philosophies on things. Um, and then you have a very robust alternative to looking at just what other people think of you. Okay. Um, I think that was all I want to say about that. I just find this so important because I think, like, yeah, especially like women clinicians, but clinicians in general, um, I mean, people in general, but I think there's just so much like life lost, so much like vitality and aliveness, so much humanity lost, so much connection lost, so many like missed opportunities for people who want to create something new and different and innovative, people who want to stop playing small, right? There's just so much of that lost when our lives are so dictated by what other people think of us or what other people might think of us, their judgments, their criticism. And if you read a lot of the those things about like people on their deathbeds, um, a lot of the common things are I wish I'd lived a life that was more true to myself. I wish I didn't care so much all the time what other people thought of me. Um, so yeah, I would just encourage you to go on this kind of journey of navigating this. And I hope I've given you some sense that it is actually possible. I know when I was in that space, it felt completely impossible. It felt like life or death. It felt like I was never going to be able to do that. And I remember thinking, at that time I was thinking, it feels like everything that I want, like fulfillment, happiness, less stress, beautiful relationships, it feels like all of that is on the other side of not having my life be directed by um, other people's thoughts and opinions and judgments. Um, so yeah, I really was sort of on the other side of that and made huge strides in the other direction. And it is a constant thing. Like I'm always reaching, I guess, new boundaries to that. But yeah, it's really exciting, and I encourage you to do that. And like I said, hopefully I've given you some hope that it is possible. And if this is something in your life, in your career, that you are really struggling with, or just that that this is part of what would make you so much more fulfilled and be able to show up more and actually serve the people you're meant to serve and be the provider that you really would want to be, I would really love to work with you. So as a coach, as a mentor in that, so reach out to me if this is something that you're interested in, if you are considering coaching, and if this is part of what you'd like to work on. Reach out to me, DM me, and we can chat about setting up a call to talk about that. Awesome. Have a great, what does it say, Tuesday, and I will chat to you guys soon. Bye.